We're going to get started in this video experience, Holes in the Gospel, in just a moment. But first, I want you to know that I love questions. Your questions and comments help both of us stay sharp and learn more. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So let's start building knowledge together. There are two ways you can ask questions. You can type them in the comments, or you can email them to info@christrevolutionchurch.com. We're glad you're about to watch this video, Holes in the Gospel, and hope you watch the other videos in this series, Preparing for Pentecost. Resurrection Sunday is not the end of the gospel. It's the beginning of an eternal victory. The open and empty tomb is the physical assurance of a new life of great and precious promises ready for you. We're looking at the days of the risen Jesus. It is these days that lead toward the emboldening of the church to present the good news of a crucified and resurrected Jesus, and doing it as a body of Spirit-empowered individuals. The Spirit-empowered individual is able to participate in the divine nature. The time does come that Jesus ascends into heaven and then sends his friends out to invite everyone to receive a seat at the table of God and a room in his house. That is the day of Pentecost, the day that God's Holy Spirit baptizes his people and then clothes them with power. Power that will identify them as a part of his family, set apart for holy purposes. The risen Jesus wants to bless you today. Let him confirm, encourage, and call you to share his life-transforming love. Take a look at Luke chapter 24, 37 through 39. They were terrified and frightened and supposed that they had saw a spirit. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? Why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Feel me, see me. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have." Fear is a powerful agent. Fear can be used to stop people from taking action. It can be used to move them to do things they would otherwise never do. Fear can be used to cripple and control or compel. Fear is fed by our inabilities, shortcomings, failures, or feelings of insignificance. Leading up to these verses in Luke, the disciples have all these factors flooding their consciousness. They had no ability to influence the authorities that would persecute and prosecute Jesus. Their loyalty to Jesus came up short as they all fled the scene when he was arrested. They failed to identify themselves as his disciples, especially Simon Peter, who flat out denied even knowing him, and he did it 3 times. Watching him die on the cross and be carried off to a tomb guarded by Roman soldiers only further washed away their memories of walking through crowds with Jesus and watching the healing of the sick and the blind, watching demons cast out, walking on the water, feeding tens of thousands with just a few loaves of bread and fish, and seeing Lazarus rise from the dead. They went from feeling significant to feeling insignificant and powerless in just a matter of 7 days. Now, Jesus' body is reported and confirmed to be missing. They were hiding for fear of the Jews, and now, who stands before them? Jesus. You might understand why they were so anxious when he shows up. Here he is standing in front of them, no knock on the door or anything, but instead nearly giving them a heart attack as he greets them with "Peace be unto you." While different in circumstance, the scene, I'm sure, was oddly familiar to when he was walking on the water. They thought he was a ghost then too. Experiences only prepare us for future events when we're able to adjust ourselves to process them consistently without anxiety. It's the reason young drivers are encouraged to take driver's education. Emergency workers go through drills. It's the reason gymnasts and other athletes practice movement and simulate scenarios, all toward replacing uncertainty with confidence by making numerous adjustments to the movement of the body and the mind. Sometimes these adjustments are major, but usually and often annoyingly so. More of the adjustments are small and seemingly unending toward that perfect result. When all the factors of fear confront us and we have not fully processed our experiences, then anxiety sets in and fear barrages us. Maybe you're thinking, that all might be true, but what about people who have reason to fear because of their experiences of abuse, addiction, oppression, prejudice, or poverty? Don't these prove fear is warranted by the real outcomes that mark their experiences? All that is present here too. The outcome of Jesus' death on the cross and the events leading up to that moment on Calvary pointed to a win in the war of influence for the opponents of Jesus. All of those battles of intellect with the religious, which appeared to be wins of the mind for Jesus, and all of the miracles among the people, which appeared to be wins of the hearts for Jesus, came to an end. Because in the end, the minds and the hearts were lost. And the enemies of Jesus may have lost those battles, but they seem to have won the war with his crucifixion. It was all for naught. He was dead and buried. They hid because their experience told them that staying out of sight would be the best way to preserve life. The disciples' experience is analogous to what happens in many of our lives. The reality of the immediate jackhammers holes in our hope, and those holes are backfilled with fear. And the sharp pain of disappointment sends the fear further into the core of our being. The disciples, looking now at Jesus, have a conflict in their experiences, as the accuracy of their intellect and emotions are challenged by evidence standing on their side of the locked door, staring them in the face. Intellect and its limits are confronted in his presence. We are suddenly aware of other aspects that come to the fore and affect our thought process, such as our backgrounds, our cognitive biases, positive and negative influences of people in our lives. In his presence, the contrast of our priorities are melted away, and the eternity that is evidenced in a risen Jesus is a humbling horizon. Jesus doesn't ask his questions because he needed the answers, but because he knows that the disciples needed them to be vocalized. They needed to identify the present problems within them as they are confronted with a new immediate truth. Jesus has come just as he said. But had he come to them or for them? The answer is yes. He came to and for them. Understanding the limits of humanity, Jesus demonstrates what John would write later. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out all fear, because fear has to do with punishment. Whoever fears is not in perfect love. Punishment and correction are not synonymous. Our pride often prevents us from gaining the positive consequences of correction. The consequences of correction are the empowerment of the individual being corrected, to build skill and discernment within them. The consequences of punishment is the embitterment of the individual being punished. Jesus confronts these people gathered behind this locked door with an assurance of his love by a simple greeting, "Peace be unto you." He asks them a simple yet complex question that is followed by another statement of reassurance. "See my hands and my feet. See that it is I myself. Feel me and see me. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have." The holes in his flesh were to match the holes in their experience. As they felt those holes, the holes jackhammered in their hope were filled with the substance of his love, and the subsequent healing began to take place with the evidence of his presence once unseen. Fear was cast out. They still had questions, but their questions would not prevent them or deter them ever again from a confidence that victory is promised and will be fulfilled. From now on, they will question their doubts and put their doubts to the test. Jesus wants to do the same for you. Dr. Christina M.H. Powell writes, Intellectual responsibility requires a commitment to question doubts in all the various forms in which they may arise. The disciples would do just that, and like he did for them, he will confirm his love for you. Jesus will meet you where you are because he has come to and for you. The holes in his flesh are the holes of the gospel, which is the good news that you are worth a great deal to God. Jesus the Messiah was pierced for your transgressions and bruised for your iniquities. All the chastisement that you deserved was put on him so that you can receive atonement and a new life. Your eternity is in front of you. Here is Jesus ready to make sure it's a life of hope and joy to fill the holes brought by your experiences. Your hiding is ended because you have been found. Prepare for Pentecost.